I'm going to turn us to the real topic at hand, which is, and maybe there's an interesting segue because you have this open environment, you have this truth, single source of truth, you have this execution over laborious strategy sort of mindset. How does GitLab and how do you, and in your whole career, how do you view intellectual property? Is there a process in your mind for, you know what, this is important enough for me to secure the future of my company, my department, my people, my product, that we need to lock this down. Like this has to be protected. So through patents or through secrecy or something. So can you talk me through how you view intellectual property and then potentially patenting through that context?
So what I'd say is at GitLab, it's not a top priority. Far from it. So in terms of keeping things secret as a competitive advantage, we definitely keep things secret for various reasons, but not necessarily, rarely, if ever. And it sometimes is shocking to me. Our competitors can see our product plans. Um, but at the same time, it's because we execute on them, we believe, much better than our competitors. So we don't think that's actually getting information out to our customers and users and our own team members, really, when we get feedback on it, is great. So what I talk about is actually most companies. In the previous company I was at, would treat that very seriously. And it was a company that Dell acquired. And patents were really important, I'd say, to them for, in my opinion, a couple different reasons. One is it was seen as increasing the value of the organization. Is the more patents a company has, the more valuable it may be perceived. Whether those patents are actually valuable more than that, sometimes that doesn't matter. So, investors may look at just the sheer number of patents. Another is it provides a potential defense against the more patents a company has, the more that another company that may think they are infringing on their patents, there may be cross infringement going on, potential, maybe not actual but potential, but it provides a defense against that. Although there's other ways to defend against that as well. That's a second. Now, to the team members, and sometimes it is real intellectual property, and you really want to patent it, and you really want to take advantage of it and use it in the future and stop other people, have a way to stop other people from using it. I haven't seen that happen as much as some places. I think that's the exception rather than the rule, but when it's the exception, it's extremely valuable. It's something you were the first to do something, and you patent it, and you can keep it something that only you can do for quite a while. It's great for team members, great for employees as well. As some companies have like bonus programs if you get a patent filed, if the patent gets granted later, et cetera. It's it's seen as a great way to, at some companies, to develop employees and give them something to achieve. Not all companies do that, but that can be very successful as well.
Yeah, the thing I often wonder about is, do we always know? We don't always know if what we're doing is groundbreaking or patentable or intellectual property, right?
Yeah, and it can be very surprising. So at the previous company I was at, I helped create the patent evaluation program with the legal team, and because doing patents was important there, and it basically it needed to be unique, it needed to be useful, and you needed to. And this is for software related ones, technology related ones. At least the bend on it was that it needed to be, you needed to put your draw the line in the sand on the date. So I believe you had to do the initial patent paperwork within a year of the initial idea being conceived or being made public, if I remember correctly, is how we set up that program. Because after that point in time, the ability to potentially patent it goes down. And that initial paperwork doesn't need to be much detail, but you need to draw that line in the sand. And sometimes, and this was a security company, that somebody in that company did a patent around is it? Making it easier to work in a data center uh, physically without having carpal tunnel syndrome. There was something along those lines. So it was completely unrelated to security, but it's pretty novel. It's a way of organizing a physical chair and a pull-out keyboard and things like that. And this person just did it themselves. They created it themselves. And they said, hey, this is really interesting. I'd like to patent it. And I believe that one was granted. And some of the others were very, very security specific. And it, it the key thing I'd say is also when doing these is when evaluating is having a program, working with a good either an in-house attorney or outside firm to help create the program and determine what should be patented. It is a very heavyweight process. So I've done three, two of which have been granted already, and one is still in the queue at the patent office. And the first one was with the company brought in an outside firm, and I think I explained the idea with my co-inventors. I think I put 40 hours with attorneys spread out over 2 or 3 months, actually more like 80 hours. And it was painful. It was re-explaining and rereading because patent language is very different than normal language. It's kind of an offshoot of different kind of legal language, I'd say. So it's hard to write it, in my opinion. It's unless you do many, many of them, it's hard to write the patent yourself. So using an outside firm, but it was hard for them to get it right. Then the second and third times, the company switched legal firms or switched the people at the legal firm, and it was an attorney at both that was also somebody who studied computer science, and it went like gangbusters. It was opposite. I think I spent 2 hours explaining the idea, and then they went away and came back 2 months later with something that was 90% correct on how to describe it. They named it ideas on how to improve it. And then it was really reviewing it and then waiting. Once it's filed with the patent office, they take a long time. So the one that, for example, that was filed 2+ years ago, where I was one of the co-inventors around vulnerability disclosure and use of blockchain technologies. I believe we're in year 3, and the patent office still hasn't looked at it. And the prediction is that the queue is 5 years. Now, the date still goes back to the original date it was filed if it's granted, and that'd be great for the company that owns that patent, where I used to work. But it does take a long time, so it's a bit deflating. But then once you get it, it's great. You get to brag about it. You get to put it on your LinkedIn, on your resume. If people Google search your name, it shows up. One of the biggest benefits of it was it's something I can brag about to family members because they understand patents, even though they're not in technology. And they get that concept. And you also get a bunch of spam, both in the mail and online, because the patent details are public. So it's keeping an eye on that. People offering to sell you plaques showing your patent, just random people that watch the recently granted patents. And I'm
So I
sure
love,
some people really do that.
yeah, I love. So let's dig in a little bit to the into the patent evaluation program. So you mentioned unique, useful, and let's just call it time boxed. So what I thought you said was, if I thought of the idea 4 years ago, and I'm like, hey, can we patent this? You have sort of a yellow flag go up, like, okay,
No, I'd
four
say not if
years.
you thought of it 4 years ago. Is did you make that idea public? It's from the
Okay,
time it's either incorporated into a product or bragged about on a website. If it's made public, it's basically a year look back to file it.
got it.
And there is some interpretation of that based on how that should work, but that's generally the rule. It's within a year of it being made public. And you also want to do it before somebody else files a patent for it as well, of course. So there's that as well.
So unique. Is that an internal rule of thumb? This feels unique, or this doesn't, or do you bring in outside help for that?
Is What is gut feel? Is have you seen it before? Is as an engineer, is Google searching out there? Has someone done this? And just because somebody's done something similar doesn't mean it's the exact thing. Um, and so, kind of doing it informally with an engineer's eye to it. And even if it's a small change on something else, that can be patented. Even if there's something similar out there but not the same, it's potentially patentable as well. Then it goes to a due diligence phase, where this is something that the legal firms that do this for a living do, is they will do a prior art search and search for similar things that have already been patented, and will bring that to your attention so you can be aware of them, and make sure that you're not doing exactly what they're doing, but doing potentially something similar or a different spin on a similar thing, et cetera, so you can document it, and make sure it is. And I'd say I helped evaluate a lot of the incoming patent ideas at that company. At that company's experience, it was very few that didn't get, very few that weren't unique from that perspective. It was sometimes just not interesting enough to the company to be patentable for the company. Like, it wasn't technology related at all, for example, that they decided not to pursue it.
And so is
And
that the
yeah,
useful category? Like, is the uniqueness of this idea useful to us?
yeah, and even at this company, for example, it's a security company, it's something on data centers and physical chairs and sliding keyboards. Very not specific to that company, but they still decided to patent. If somebody tried to bring forth a better way of making scrambled eggs, that'd be awesome, but probably not something that Dell would want to patent. Or maybe they would, I don't know.
And
But
and
it's two separate. It's very important and very interesting, but not something that that kind of company would find useful to put on their patent list or
and
invest the time and money into.
yes. And is the usefulness a function of what you said earlier, like just sometimes the sheer number of patents, or for the competitive advantage in the investment world or the acquisition world, and or beefing up my patent count so I can defend other patents, or employee morale and making my employees feel like we value their unique ideas? Is that the category of usefulness, sort of?
Yeah, I'd say so. Is
Okay.
would an investor, whether it's a company that's going to acquire your company or if the company's public, a public investor, find the title of this patent to be interesting to that company, see as its value to the company, is one way to look at it. Even if you're not going to take advantage of it, that is one way. It is an expensive and time-consuming way to increase your value with your those outside the company that are evaluating it. But it definitely does work. Some companies have hundreds, thousands, and thousands of patents, and people definitely see that as value, as significant value. So, and that was one of the reasons that company did file patents, is we wanted to see. It was something that many companies did in the security space to show their value to potential investors, and that's one of the reasons we did it.
Yeah, I'm just having a thought about the sort of blanket patenting probably means that everything we're doing is patented somewhere in someone's filing cabinet, right?
Yeah,
I
it's kind
mean,
of the antithesis of open source, right? And I think that's why GitLab, it doesn't have a similar patent program. Is that there's definitely a lot of talk of, does it stifle competition? Does it stifle innovation? Um, on the other side, does it protect the investment that a company does in their people and in developing these ideas? So there's definitely pros and cons on both sides. Um, and the Then there's the whole of being on the other side of a company defending itself from a patent infringement lawsuit, which is an interesting space. And I was a part of that once in the past as well, which um, the term is often used, patent trolls, where companies that, I think the definition of that is companies that don't do much other than acquire patents or create patents and sue other companies based on those. That definitely does not help the industry. If it's one competitor who has an idea, competitor A and competitor B in the same space, and one has an idea and they want to protect it because they don't, when they release their product, they don't want their competitor to copy it, at least as is, and get benefit out of it, I can see the value of the patent there. If it's a company just creating patents to sue people, to extract money out of them, to get settlements, that doesn't provide a lot of value, except to that company that's doing the suing and making money off of it. That's just
so
my opinion, though.
yeah, no, I get it. I get it. And patent infringement and dealing with trolls is there certainly something that technical co-founders and CTOs have to deal with once or twice in their careers. Hopefully, not more than that. The the impetus for you to you said you have 3 patents, of which 2 have been awarded. What was your impetus for doing that? Like, I know you talked about bragging rights, but what was the real reason?
Yeah, the primary reason was when I did the first two. When I did the first one, actually the first two, it was before that company was acquired. So it was a private company, not liquid yet, and it was a way that I was a shareholder in that company. It was a way to help do my part to help improve the value of the company, because that's what it's one of the things investors found to be invested in. Of those 2 patents that I did at the time, I think it was to 20. So it was that the company had overall, roughly. So it was not a huge number, but it wasn't a small number either. And also, I was able to encourage others and help some others with filing their ideas, which was good. So maybe I had a hand in another 2 to 4 of them, which was rewarding also to mentor others. But that was the primary reason.
Got it. So let's patent this to give our company an edge, make it more attractive for investment. And as you mentioned, would an investor find the patent title interesting?
Yeah, I'd say that's key. Is it in the space with the? Does it sound? I imagine that some investors that are not looking at it in too much detail are looking at the number of patents. Like if you look at, I forget which companies have the most patents, but if I remember correctly, I think IBM has thousands and thousands of patents, as an example, and they get a lot of value out of it. Are you going to get as much value out of 5 to 10? Probably not. Maybe 1 or 2 of those ends up being extremely valuable, but as a small company, I would not focus. So this was at that company. It's at the stage where the company was cash flow positive or close to it, and was continuing to grow significantly, and things were going well, and had a stable customer base that was growing significantly year over year. That was a good time to be working on this. I wouldn't work on this in the first couple of years of the company, though. I think growing your customer base, making sure your customers are happy, keeping retention in good shape of your existing customers. Those are much more important in these kinds of things.
Mm.
It's more of an
And
icing on the
that,
cake type thing.
yeah, okay. And that leads me sort of to my last question on this, which is when should CTOs or technical co-founders or leaders uh, look into protecting their intellectual property through patents?
I'd say probably 2 inflection points. One is if there's just such a unique and awesome idea in a space that you think is really going to make the company, do it earlier. And especially if you can outsource most of it to a firm that specializes in this, so you don't have to do it yourself, because it does take a lot of time and specialized knowledge. But that's going to be the exception, where that's going to be the case. I'd say later is when the company is on solid footing and not worrying about survival, but worrying about how to accelerate growth and potentially be acquired later. That's a good time to do it as well, for a couple of things. And I would say is talking to the board of directors as well as companies in my space that have been acquired. What's their patent portfolio look like? What do you recommend we do so we can be on equal footing with them? Is what I'd say.
Yeah, it is interesting. When I've been part of quite a few fundraising efforts, and it is interesting that I would say 5 or 6 or 7 times out of 10, one of the first questions out of a potential investor's mouth is, what prevents company A or B or C from coming and doing what you're doing? And especially in the seed rounds. And I guess this would be a great answer. Well, we have a patent for that. Apropos
Yeah.
your earlier example, like if it's something that you really need in order to gain a
Mhm.
foothold, and it serves the fundraising. But I do like the second one, which is almost like a cross your T and dot your I's kind of thing, where as CTO, look back and start looking at which components of your architecture um, you may not have thought about in that context, but what is unique and what is IP, and go and do that homework.
Hmm. Makes sense to
Very
me.
good. The employee morale or I guess satisfaction. That's an interesting component I didn't think about, which is if I've got all these smart people working for me, uh, what better way to actively demonstrate to them that you care about their reputation, their future, their career by saying, hey, find your patents or your opportunities to protect IP, and we'll help you with our attorneys or our connections to get that filed for you. That's awesome.
It appeals to a small percentage, but the ones that it does appeal to, it appeals in a really big way. So at that previous company, for example, I think the engineering team and other experts, security experts, were probably in the number of 300 people. I think of that 300, 10 filed more than zero patents. But it was really, really valuable, those 10,
Yeah,
to their morale.
you have to address some sort of I guess a strange bravado or you know I guess as scientists we kind of have this premise that almost everything has been thought of, and I mean, of course the universe is huge and there's a lot to be discovered, but I know my natural tendency is to go towards, well, I'm sure this has been done before. And now you have to put on
Yeah,
the hat that says, wow, I might have been the first person to think about doing this.
it's usually, in my opinion, it's kind of like when starting a startup. It's taking an emerging technology and applying it to an existing problem. And in a startup, it's all about execution. Having a good idea that is valuable to a large number of people, and you can execute on it. A patent's kind of similar. It's something that's valuable and takes a new technology in place. So, I could talk about the patents that are public. Is one was looking at um, attacks, hacker attacks, and IP addresses that they were coming from, and then running them through an algorithm to then predict future how dangerous is that this IP address, and it was how risky a packet is. And I thought, this has got to be not, this is, somebody must have done this before. And people did similar things in some cases, some of the time, but not exactly that, not the way that we were doing it. So it was pretty unique, even though it seemed really obvious to me at the time. It's because of the experience I had at that company and working with those technologies and looking at behaviors of bad actors and how that showed up on customers' networks. And it wasn't all that obvious to most, because they weren't in that kind of environment thinking about those kinds of things. But it was obvious to myself and to my co-inventors. So even though we did a couple of times say, should we even bother with this? This is too obvious to us. But because it's obvious to the inventors doesn't mean it's obvious to everyone. But it's easy. It is easy to have that bias.
Yeah, and then so you looked at each other and you thought, well, we should patent this, or we should look into the process.
That one was an easy sell as well because it was right directly in our space. The other one, which was also granted, was this was also felt kind of obvious to me, was around doing performance analysis of databases, a different way of doing that, looking at the frequency of queries on a relational database, and then also how long they run in order to optimize a database. Not security related, but this is a managed service, a software as a service business. We had these big databases and they were having performance issues. And I tried to buy, the reason why I knew that one was a good idea, I tried to buy a solution for it, find open source, I couldn't find one. So I had to write one. So that, in that case, I did know it was unique just by its nature because I
Mm,
tried to not solve it myself and I couldn't find a way to do it
mm.
without building it myself.
So do you, as a general rule of thumb, let's say you're the CTO that you do have traction, you do have product market fit, you're cash flow positive, things are starting to go into sort of scale mode.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think taking a close look at your intellectual property and what can be patented is a prudent thing to do?
I think it is worth doing over time, especially after the company is stabilized for a couple of years. Or again, if you have that really unique, really critical idea that's critical to the company's success and is super unique compared to your competitors, it's worth considering that earlier. Otherwise, if you had a bunch of patents and no customers, that would not be a good thing to exaggerate.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then, Wayne, on the patent trolls, being on the receiving end of that, do you have any like what happened? How do you?
So I can tell you
And
my the previous company I was at that they wouldn't call them a troll necessarily, but they had sued all our competitors for patent infringement. They didn't have a technology themselves, as far as I could tell, at least. They just had this patented idea, and they waited for our competitors to either be acquired by a larger company or go public, or be on the path to sue them. My theory as to why is that's when stakes are high and they're willing to potentially settle. And it was definitely a big time sink of mine. I was the primary person on the project on the technical side in putting things together with the legal team, and it was follow all the rules of discovery, copy all emails and all files on various people's laptops and servers, gather information back and forth, review that information. It's very confidential information, number of customers that do this or do that, et cetera. And without it being a distraction for the company, which was a challenge as well. And then doing all the preparation of the data, reviewing it back and forth, it probably took up 6 months of my life. But maybe not the whole time, but probably 50% of my time for 6 months. So it can be very time consuming. And then preparing for the deposition, which was a surreal experience of the firm definitely prepared me well. But it was 8 hours where I was being videoed. The had my company's attorney sitting next to me, who had spent a lot of time prepping me, and then the attorney for the other company that was suing that company for patent infringement across the table from me, but that person wasn't being recorded. I was. So it was interesting, and I was prepared well with one exception. So they said, "Is you don't have to talk quickly and answer everything quickly. Answer everything honestly." They were very clear about that, but you don't have to answer quickly. Really think about your answers, and also, if they ask you to look at something, really do look at it. And maybe you think you saw it before, but occasionally say, "This email you wrote 7 years ago about this thing or this PowerPoint slide." Where you said this and this. Tell me about this or that. They'd also ask, as reporters do, leading questions. So, is this what happened? And that what happened? And that what happened? Is that right? And they want a yes or no answer. And you have to really watch that. I was prepared really well for those things. I did grow, and I still talk about this days. I never want to hear the phrase again, "Do you see it?" Because the other attorney asked me that at least 500 times in 8 hours. Can you go to page 537 and look at email to line 24? Do you see it? And
mm,
just over and over and over again. The only thing I think they didn't prepare me as well for is the person on the other side, probably two things. He made a lot of faces, a lot of nonverbal communication, and he wasn't on camera. And I was thinking he was doing that because eventually the deposition would be be part of the legal case, and the other side, whoever's watching it, wouldn't see that part. They just see my reaction. So it would say outlandish things occasionally, and also just kind of wore me down. 8 hours is a long time. And I did a lot of times of 30 seconds just staring out the window, looking at traffic in downtown Atlanta pass by in midtown Atlanta, because he was thinking about something else, trying to think out the next thing and see if I'd say anything else. So, for example, and he says, "So, Etienne, what does this email say? And is this show that you were using feature X at feature Y at Y date?" And then I'd say, "Yes, I see it." I'd say, "No, I don't believe that's the case because here's what the case was." And then there'd be silence. I'd be sitting there waiting silent, but the attorney would be going, making physical gestures like that, trying to get me to say more. But of course, they weren't on camera doing that, and looking upset that I wasn't providing more, etc. Those kinds of games I did not like. But overall, it turned out okay. The company decided to do with the case what they thought was right, and overall, I know talked to them that they were happy with the result. But it was definitely not a fun process along the way.
that sounds terrible. It almost makes me wonder if, I mean, that is extreme, but are there prudent steps that we can take as CTOs to not get into that situation? So, I mean, the whole thing about quoting your past emails, that sounds deadly to me.
Yeah, it was like, I'm not joking, 7 or 8, 9 years ago, a presentation given to a customer about a feature. Also, all the trying to find prior art to invalidate the patent that's being used to say you're infringing on is just so much work, hard to do. It's how to prepare against it. I'd say is talk with someone who's done it before and think about best practices. If you do get something, is definitely hire a legal firm that does this for a living early to walk you through it. And I'd say also there are, and I don't have personal experience with this at any of the companies I worked at. There's ways to join into, I'm using the wrong word, but consortiums of companies that own patents, a large number of them, so that if someone is sued for patent infringement to try to get a settlement, that if you're part of that consortium, they happen to own patents that they could sue that company that's suing you with. So it's kind of a mutually assured destruction kind of thing, where you can join consortiums like that, where you pay for the privilege, but it's a defense mechanism. I don't have experience with that myself or at the companies I worked at, but I think those things exist to help. I'd say is be prepared, especially when there's a liquidity event coming. Um, that's when these companies come out of the woodwork because they know it's a good time to try to get you to settle on something.
Mm,
And also,
wow.
if you're watching a patent as well, sorry, if there's one that you know out there when it's going to expire, this patent also in particular was going to expire. It was at the end of its life. So they were working hard to sue two companies at the same time before their patent expired. So that was a deadline on their side versus on ours, but it was the combination of those two things.
Wow. Well, Wayne, thank you for terrifying me.
At the end, it was all about money, and the company was okay with where things landed. So,
Well, I
um,
think, I wonder how many companies get put out of business because they don't have the resources to defend themselves.
um, it's a good point. My guess is not that many
Yeah.
compared to what it could be, and I think it's because the people who try to make a living at doing this only want to go after people with deep pockets because they have the deep pockets to pay. Putting a small company out of business where you're going to exhaust the company's money is not
Yeah. It's like
it's
when you
not
go,
financially productive.
yeah, when you go all in on Texas Hold'em, it's like, well, I have what I have, so I
Right? Yeah,
can't give
that's a
you
great
more.
analogy.
Yeah.
So it's not as scary as it could be in those situations, and but it is something to keep an eye on and not something to look forward to. It is not a
Yeah.
privilege to be called to do a deposition. That is for sure.
That is a fascinating story. I mean, it's when you're strong and you're coming in and you just had breakfast and you feel great, and then as time goes on, the dehydration sets in, the fatigue, the brain, you know, gets fatigued, and all they're trying to do is grab that 22-second lost your cool moment or something, and they've got it.
Yeah, it
Thank
was,
you.
and thankfully I didn't. I was just it definitely 8 hours. They find a lot of time to
Yeah,
wear. That's a lot of time to wear one down. But overall, I went home, I slept that night, and I could care less. I couldn't care less afterwards. So it was definitely an ordeal, but it had a distinct end time, which was good.
got it. Okay, Wayne, anything else you think you want to throw in, or anything
Yeah, it's great stuff.
else? That was
Wish
good.
we ended on a more positive note. That was kind of the unfun side, but overall, I'd say the two big things I was able to do in this space is one, I was able to brag to family members, hey, there's this cool thing. Here's my name on something, and it is one. Maybe one and a half is being able to put it on my resume, it's my personal brand, etc. And the other, even on the defense side, I met a lot of smart folks, people that were had a computer science background, computer engineering background, and also were attorneys. I met a lot of really smart folks, and it was interesting. It was an interesting way to look at things. I don't necessarily want to do it again, but it was a learning experience. And so I did learn quite a bit from it. I still would rather have not done it, but I
Yeah,
can't say it's all
I mean,
negative.
that is as about as positive as it's going to get, and very helpful. Very helpful. I appreciate this just chat on our IP and patents, and congrats on your patents and the patent pending. It sounds like you're well on your way with this stuff. So thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Etienne. It's great talking with you.
Okay,
Have a great
brother.
day.
Okay, man. Good. I'm going to stop this and